Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Urbina, and this is Omnichannel X's Omnichannel Podcast. Omnichannel X is brought to you by Urbina Consulting. Omnichannel X is our international learning portal where we host the thought leaders and case studies we think will be most helpful for content-rich organizations trying to build better relationships across all touchpoints. Now, enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Omnichannel X podcast. This is your host, Urbina, and I am here today with Michel Andrews, who is a well-known name in the little community of content modeling and structured content folks who we've been talking to a lot on this series about content modeling and designing content for omnichannel and personalization. This is part of that library of content. So if you haven't checked that out already, check out the session series under events on our website, and you can sign up for all the sessions that came with that, and you'll have the whole on-demand library that you can use to educate yourself on all things content models. We've had myself and Carrie Hain and Cruz Saunders and Jeff Eaton and Yanko Ivanov and Michel Andrews and. So if you are into content modeling, that's a treasure trove of material. So really recommend you check that out and sign up for that whole package. It's all free of charge, just for registrants. Today with Michel, we're going to be talking about the fact that people are really rushing into content modeling, kind of like a tech thing. Like I bought a database and I've got to set up my database, and that's the way they're looking at the whole content management and content modeling exercise, when it's really much more about understanding your user requirements, your brand goals, your channels, what kind of experience you're trying to support. And we wish that people would take a lot more time preparing before they actually went out and bought these systems and then started pressuring themselves to chuck their content in there. Also, the fact that you don't have to model everything. If you are a content modeler, you can think about where you can, as much as we want to reuse and talk about single sources of truth, where are there times where you can just point out to an existing database and say, I don't have to model that. Somebody else has already done a database that handles that for me, like product information management, or like a movie database, or if you've got a product data database, or math, or financial information. Lots of these things you don't have to model yourself if they are already available in some structured format that you can integrate with. You don't have to, everything you present to your users doesn't have to be managed in the one CMS. It just needs to be interconnected in a way in your content model. And then how do you decide what to structure, which is, I think, a great question, which I'm going to try to bring up on our last, we're having a panel of experts. We've done 2 already with Carrie and Jeff and myself and Cruz and Megan and we've also talked about how you decide what you want to structure, which I think is a really good question, which I'm going to bring up on our next panel discussion, because we've had these panels with Megan Casey and Cruz Saunders and myself and Jeff Eaton and Carrie Hain. But we didn't actually, we're talking about, assuming you want to model things. How do you decide what goes in your model and what doesn't need modeling? Or what do you make an actual element or attribute or property or field, as opposed to just leaving as text or whatever? And then, of course, AI. Where does AI come into modeling in the future of structured content? Michel turned me onto this acronym RAG, which I'd never heard before, Retrieval Augmented Generation. I apologize. These acronyms are going to keep coming fast and furious as this new technology develops. But that's the retrieval word is the big one. The fact that you, rather than kind of AIs making stuff up based on whatever happens to be in their training set, you can use the AI to handle the conversational part, but the facts are actually coming from a knowledge graph or a database where it can look up the real facts and make sure that it's properly taking that into account when it constructs a response. So that sounds like a really interesting thing. I don't know if this particular RAG thing has to be the thing everybody goes with, but that concept of fact-based AI that doesn't make stuff up and doesn't propose non-facts in its responses sounds really, really important. So, without any further ado, enjoy the episode. Okay, everybody, hi. I'm here live. Well, not live. I'm live with Michael Andrews, and we're recording this for you for the podcast. You want to say hi, Michael, to everybody?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Andrews, and I'm really happy to be here with Nas today.
Awesome. Right. So, Michael and I have known each other for, wow, years. I don't know, coming on a
Yep.
decade.
Yep. I think so.
Yeah, as people in the omni-channel and structured content world, we've kind of been in each other's orbits. Um, and as we're doing this structured content, designing content for omni-channel and personalization session series, I thought it was great to have Michael on the podcast this year to add to that library of content. So I'm sure this is going to be evergreen because we are talking a lot about a lot of the same things in the content modeling world as we have been for 20 plus years. It's just that we're taking them to new people and talking about how they impact new channels. But the core stuff is all been been there, and the fundamental discipline is there. So hopefully these sessions are being educational for you, so hey, you can do this. I can tell you that these skills will last you a lifetime. So Michael, do you want to tell the people a little bit about yourself, your background, what kind of work you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Nas. I work as a content strategist for the past 15 years, and prior to that, had a background in user experience. So I really think a lot about the intersection between content and user experience. I like a lot of people, have gotten very interested in content architecture. And obviously, structure is a huge part of content architecture. Um, my roles have varied over the years. I've worked as a senior manager in a major global consultancy doing CMS implementations and website replatformings for them. Most recently, I was working as a content strategy evangelist for one of the leading headless content management system vendors. So I've seen this from different perspectives, from the agency perspective. I've also worked in-house for large organizations like Verizon, and then I've worked with the vendors. So I sort of see how important it is for implementations to be done right and to really set yourself up for future success. And the structured content is a huge part of that.
Fantastic. And uh, your main role in the projects is content strategy, content modeler, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. So a lot of it has to do with eliciting the requirements that people have when they are looking to essentially implement new systems, modernize what they are working with, and starting to connect often disparate systems that need to coordinate with one another. And so there's obviously a lot of technical requirements around that, but there's a lot of business requirements and thinking about the user requirements, both from the employee's perspective to provide the right content for customers, as well as ultimately the customer end user's perspective of everything that these systems are producing. So a lot of what I do is being sort of a Sherpa, I guess you might say, helping to bridge all these different types of functional responsibilities, get stakeholders involved, try to make sure that the right people are showing up to get the right requirements so that people know what it is they need to build. Because
Yeah.
we're at a stage now, you can't just expect there to be an off-the-shelf solution that's going to do exactly what you need it to do for you as an organization. You have to design it yourself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, well, that you're of course speaking the language of omnichannel. You're at
Yes.
omnichannel X. Um, the I've done several diagrams about the Venn diagram, like the brand goals, the user goals, and then the technical reality, and in the middle you kind of have content modeling
Yeah.
and content strategy. So, in your experience, what are the kind of the common challenges in creating and then rolling out a content model?
I think there are several. One is just getting people engaged. It doesn't always strike people as being an important thing to do to set up a content model. They see it as kind of just a technical necessity. They want to get it over and done with as soon as possible. I understand their desire to, get something launched as quickly as possible, but there's often just kind of an impatience around this, and people may misunderstand this as being entirely a technical requirement and not understand that business stakeholders really need to participate in this, as well as the UX team, to really get the right perspectives and think about all the different dimensions that you want to consider when you're developing a content model. What are the author's requirements? How is this going to be delivered in different channels? What kinds of interactions are customers going to have with this, and how's that going to affect how we structure the pieces of the content? Things like the customer journey, something I know you talk a lot about with a lot of passion. That's hugely important, is to be thinking about that customer journey as you're developing your content model. So these are all really important factors, and sometimes they get short shrift. I mean, I've worked, certainly from the perspective of a content management system vendor, I've seen a lot of customers are like, great, I'm ready to go. And I want to just do this as quickly as possible. And let's just take what we have currently and port it over to the new system and get this launched as quickly as possible. And they're missing this opportunity to really restructure what they have so that it can do a lot more. So that's first barrier. The second barrier really is around education, that a lot is still pretty new to a lot of people. They don't necessarily know how content models are developed, what goes into them, what they need to do. Again, it can be treated as entirely as a technical exercise, and you may get someone who has expertise in something like data modeling, which is very, very valuable, but you're not getting all the elements that are necessary in a content model. You're not thinking about things like guidelines necessarily. You're not thinking about all the validations that are necessary to produce quality content. So these are, content has some, all kinds of things that need to be there to support the quality of that content, and those things can be built into the model. So you can automate these things and make it less arduous for people to constantly be working to try to produce the right content. That we can have systems help them with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I am definitely passionate about making sure these things map onto the customer journey, and and it resonates with me as a recurring theme. This is just the database stuff. We need to have some data model to throw our stuff into our database. In an ideal world, people will be working on their content and their content strategy and model for months, if not maybe a year or so, for some big organizations before they actually purchased some of these new headless CMSs, which are so hot. I am seeing the kind of teenager clean your room kind of transitions to headless, where we've bought a headless CMS, we want to decommission all these other CMSs that are running around. So I'm just going to shove everything in the closet, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to structure it later. So
Yep.
the room looks clean because we're in the new CMS, but we're
Right.
literally doing nothing to take
Yep.
advantage
Yep.
of the new options that we've just paid
Mhm.
for.
Mhm. Yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah. Yep.
So you mentioned the differing requirements. I have this question that's dear to my heart. Is
Hmm.
uh, I'm interested to hear how you balance the technical requirements of the content model, like what it has to do for omnichannel, what it has to do for the technology to do what it's supposed to do, with which usually adds more metadata, more complexity,
Hmm.
uh, with learnability and usability for the content creators. Because I think a lot of our audience is probably, if they are just trying to get to grips with content modeling, they're going, how do I make this not an unwieldy beast that no
Yes.
one can figure out or
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question, and I think we have to look at the maturity of the organization as it relates to this whole journey. this is part of digital transformation, and so and organizations are at different stages in digital transformation, and that applies to working with structured content as much as it applies to you know automation in general for business processes and other sorts of things like that. So you got to look where the organization is, and typically organizations are at different stages of maturity within a large organization. I mean, there are pockets that are doing quite well and are charging ahead, and other parts that aren't getting the love. They don't have the budget, things like that too. You need to be realistic about what part of the organization you're working with at a given time.
And that's even
There are,
teams within a single department.
yeah, and where they are, and kind of develop a roadmap. And the beautiful thing about a content model is it can evolve over time. Now, it's best to try to get everything right from the start. I mean, I definitely um, agree with you about trying to get all your as much figured out up front before you start implementing anything. But there is an opportunity to evolve this thing over time. So if you have a roadmap and you at least have the foreknowledge of where you want to be going, you can make it a little bit more sophisticated over time. Now, I think to your point about the usability of this is really, really critical. I mean, it's easy to overwhelm people with content models, and they can be overly complex. And I've seen people try to implement a headless system, particularly people coming from, say, a data modeling perspective, and they want to break everything down to the nth degree, for them it's like, oh, I just can avoid making a certain call to a database, and this is going to be the most efficient way to do it for someone who is a developer. But for the person who's trying to develop the content, you can find you have this what turns out to be this incredible nesting sequence where people have broken things down to so many levels of detail that they get lost. They don't even know where it is they need to go to add a detail or revise something, and that doesn't work really well. So I think the authoring experience always needs to be upfront in the minds of people when they're developing the content model. That's why it's really important to bring in the content strategists and the even authors who would be creating some of this key content, and involve them in the process, and like ask these questions like, how do you think about the themes that you're going to be providing to customers? How often do you need to update certain kinds of details? And you start prioritizing how important it is to break apart different pieces by listening to these people. You start realizing that, this is something that gets updated a lot. It makes sense to break this apart. I can live with a bigger chunk of content if it all tends to stay together, and it's only looked at once, this whole big chunk. But when you start having pieces that need to recombine with other pieces, and you want to just update in one place and things like that, it makes sense to break it out. So that's the kind of dialogue. I don't want to call it a negotiation, because I mean that sounds like a treaty you're trying to sign here, but a dialogue that happens between the non-technical folks and the technical folks as well. So you get that dialogue going, and then you try to figure out what makes sense for the organization given where they are.
Yeah, well, so I think we talked on some of the other episodes about how you're not trying to release the iPhone 12 on day one.
Yeah.
You cannot and should not think that the your first iteration of the content model will be the best iteration that will ever be, because you waited too long, and it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't
Yeah.
make business sense. It doesn't make technical sense to try to just keep engineering this thing until it's perfect before you do anything with it.
Mhm.
Simultaneously, I think I was thinking to try to get a little less abstract, to try to think of examples. Like
Mm,
what are examples of content that you do need to break out, and what are things that you can leave together? And there's also one thing is where are there, if you can think of any examples that you've touched in your career, and I have a couple in my head, of where you go, okay, I'm not going to model this in the content model per se, um, in any real detail. This is just going to be a pointer to a database that has
mm,
its own data model, and we're going to
right.
kind of bring that in,
Yeah.
and not try to manage it as content per se in the content management system. It just has to be a reference to an external database,
Right.
rather
Right.
than.
Yeah. Um, on that latter point, that's a really good way to look at this. There are things like product information management systems and things like that. That's all structured data. You don't need to be managing that within a content management system, because there's a whole nother system that can be the system of record for that, the source of truth, we like to say. So yeah, and there's lots of neat ways now to combine uh, your content model with other data sources. There's the whole world of APIs. Since content now is just being defined through APIs, you're able to connect things any way you want. So yeah, think about different sources of truth, and where it makes sense to define what is the source of truth for that. Back to your question though about the what things to model and what things really are not the things to model. I mean, I think the really big opportunities, to give you know some concrete examples. So we're finding more and more folks who work in marketing, for example, are getting interested in structured content. Well, an obvious place for them to start are things like landing pages. So landing pages have different pieces to them, and you want to say be creating different variations of these different pieces. So you can optimize that landing page, you can personalize it or customize it for different audiences or different scenarios and things like that. So that's a really useful thing to be able to model. There are things that you don't require a lot of heavy modeling. Your blog post won't require heavy modeling at all. I mean, it's a pretty simple thing. I mean, um, unless you're planning on reusing pieces of that, which oftentimes when you're developing a blog post, you don't really have the expectation that you're going to reuse pieces of it. You're not going to have that natural structure there so much. So there's that kind of continuum of things that you're going to be reworking in different ways, either to create variations or customizations, or to reuse pieces of it, or things like that, and then things that you're not having those same demands on you for the content.
I think that the blog post example is an interesting one, because it makes me think back to one of the first examples I used to refer to for structured content, which was actually a blog about movies. So it was movie reviews. So it
Okay.
was really reviews rather than a blog, but it's like they're very structurally similar. It's just a kind of,
Right.
it's a point of view in a kind of narrative
Yeah.
structure. But what was cool about it, and this is an interesting thing to try to make this more concrete for people who are getting used to it, the movie database is not part of the content model,
Hmm.
but a movie reference is. So let me break that down. So I think this is to make this concrete. Like, you can have an article, a blog post, or let's say a movie review, and the movie database has got the movies, the dates, the years, the directors, the cover shot. It's got all of the structured data about the movies.
Right.
So, but in your model of an article or a review, the only thing that you're modeling into that is saying, here I have a pointer, and it is a movie pointer. I'm pointing to a movie. I'm not just
Right.
making a hyperlink. This is not a link from point A to point B. You're not supposed to click it and go somewhere else.
Hmm.
It's a signal to the processor when you're serving up my review or my blog post, my article, whatever it is, go to the movie database and
Mhm.
pull whatever we've defined we want to show about a movie that I'm talking about and show it
Right.
in the way that it is appropriate. So there
Yes.
you don't have to do all the modeling of what a movie is just because
No.
you want to include movies in a structured way into your content model. So that takes a little stress out of the model thinking where do we already have structured data that is
Mhm.
in a good state? We just need to define a meaningful point. You're saying this is a product reference, this is a movie
Yes.
reference, this is a
Yes.
feature reference,
Yep.
and so on.
That's a really good example. So yeah, with movies, we have something like IMDb, that has all the structured data around the movies, and then we have different movie reviews, and so we may have movie critics in different newspapers, for example, and things like that. And you might be able to say, all right, that critic is the author of this review. Um, Maybe there's a tiny bit of structure there. They give a certain number of stars potentially to the movie. Um, and the review itself may have a minor amount of structure. I mean, there may be some sort of summary headline review in a paragraph, and then it goes into something a little bit more, and you may be able to pull out that summary
Mm.
in
Short
another
description, meta
context.
description, that
Right.
kind of stuff.
Exactly. But yeah, and that's really a good example. So someone who is accessing a system that, let's imagine they're at a theater, and at a kiosk or something, and are trying to book the ticket there. I mean, they may even be pulling out a piece of that movie review just to sort of see what one critic said, in the headline, if they're trying to make a choice around something. But the rest of that, the details of the movie would be coming from a database.
Yeah, so then I think the guideline is like, are you going to update it separately? Are you going to show it separately? And are you going to have very particular guidelines about it?
Yeah,
So the way that you write a headline, the way that you write a short description or a meta description, those are very specific, and that's where you have kind of your brand voice. So that
yeah,
deserves to be broken out as its own thing. So you can give those particular guidelines. Like this paragraph at the top is not just a paragraph; it's it is the teaser or the short
yes,
description or the tagline or whatever.
yeah,
And so you want to give elements to the things that are going to have lots of rules about them, even if they're
yeah,
not going to get reused that much. But if you
right.
want editorial consistency, every one time someone hits one of these kind of content, we always want this first sentence to be like this first paragraph to be like that, and then I want a
Mhm.
series of bullets that do that, etc. Those are
Yeah,
things that you want to watch for to pull out.
yeah.
Um, we're giving guidelines to the human modelers. Where do you see AI contributing in the world of structured content and omnichannel?
I think this is a really
Where and how?
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting area. So, um, first of all, I think that structured content is even more important now in the age of AI. We know that um, AI by itself, or at least generative AI, because there are many flavors of AI out there, but generative AI by itself has a number of limitations. It does some amazing things, but it has a lot of limitations. And I think structured content uh, really helps to overcome some of those limitations. But conversely, I think that generative AI can aid a lot of things as it relates to structured content. So one of the areas really is around helping to connect um, the helping to develop the right content for very specific targeted things. So one of the things that's been a challenge for organizations is developing all the specific content that you start to need to have as the online channels become our primary way of communicating with customers, and they expect everything they could possibly ever need to be available online. And it's like, whoa, who's created all this content? Well, we have an opportunity with generative AI to help fill in some of those gaps, provided we use it in a very, very targeted way. So we give it some very structured inputs. We tell it we need some sort of description about something that doesn't exist currently. Uh, it can generate that description, and then we can slot it into our content model so that that well-defined piece of content then can be delivered where it's needed, when it's needed, and it's gone through some sort of process review, so we're not just getting some randomly generated thing and we're not sure how good it is. So I think that's really a big opportunity for generative AI. I think there are other areas. We're just talking a moment ago about databases and connecting it to content. So as you are well aware, there's this whole area of semantic AI, or knowledge graphs, and we're seeing a lot of opportunities now to even connect generative AI with semantic AI, and there are opportunities to make those things work together. There's an approach in generative AI called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, and it basically points to a database, and you say, I need you to tell me the concrete facts about something before I can generate something that makes sense to people. And you're able to use this RAG approach with knowledge graphs, starting to publish how to do this and starting to develop tools on this. So it's still pretty early stages, but this is exciting stuff. And I think there'll be a lot of more of this happening. And it's really going to be something that any of us who are interested in this area are going to want to look into and hopefully be able to take advantage of.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's great because you kind of pinged two of my favorite things, which are, one is I think so many people are, and I just did a webinar on this. So many people are kind of treating AI like a search engine.
Yeah.
In fact, they talk about querying it. They rather than like a prompt, the
Mm.
language that we use, I think
Yeah.
is kind of broken around AI.
Mm.
Rather than thinking about the AI as something, I'm speaking about generative AIs. You can actually kind of talk to ChatGPT,
Sure.
Gemini, Bard, Claude, that kind of thing. We kind of like it's like we've swapped the word prompt for the word query. I think in the general lexicon, people are
Mm.
just thinking about, how do I construct the perfect query? How do I ask the right question?
Yeah.
It's this sort of one-shot thing.
Exactly.
Whereas um, uh, realizing that we can have a conversation with this thing. Like,
Mm.
you don't have to just engineer your perfect paragraph and then send it and then get a response. You can talk back and forth iteratively and improve these things.
Mm. Yeah.
So, but if you're um, doing that in a way that matches with your content model, which is what you just raised, which is one of my favorite things, and the other thing I don't think people are talking enough about, which is that you can explain to an AI, when you reply, I want you to reply in this structure.
Yes.
Um, give me a summary of
Mm.
this thing, or give me expand out this summary, et cetera, et cetera. So you can tell the AI, this is how my content works, and you give it the names. This is called the short description, this is called the headline, and et cetera. And there's a missed opportunity often to they just want to kind of get the AI to blah out a result, which then they rework. But you can explain AI's structure, and they can get it, and you can plug it into your content model and say that this is how you do short description responses, this is how you do feature description responses, this is how you do chat responses, and then it's very capable of actually doing that, of understanding your content model and giving appropriate responses based on those guidelines you have on a element and element by element basis. And then this RAG thing, making sure that it's actually got facts behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I think our first podcast of this whole content modeling library that we're putting together, I was talking with Yanko Ivanov, and at the time, there was the problem of hallucinations was
Mm.
top of everybody's mind. The fact
Yeah.
that these things were just making stuff up when they
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a good
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
And
They
not that
will.
they've stopped, they
No,
still
they
do.
still do it. Yeah.
If you're just using ChatGPT and hammering away at it. But I think that we need this popularization of something like, so what did RAG stand for again?
Retrieval augmented generation.
Retrieval augmented generation.
Yep.
I like that. Yeah, yeah. So don't just talk out your digital behind.
Hmm.
If you don't know the real answer, get the facts,
Yeah.
but then wrap those facts in a conversational way so that they work for
Hmm.
content context or conversational context.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we burned through that time. Yeah, that was that's we need to get you back on the podcast, I think, because that flew by. Um, so I want to do one last question though. How do you have any tips or feelings on how you measure the quality or effectiveness of your model? So you're done, you've designed it, you've got your stakeholders on board. How do you know that your model is a good one?
um, I think you have to get different stakeholders to buy into it. So kind of going back to my earlier theme is one person can't hoard the ownership of this model, and it's got to represent a lot of different points of view. So this is kind of basic user acceptance is what we're talking about here. Um, I don't know of any sort of technical way to evaluate this. I mean, you raised the very important issue earlier about what is the right level of complexity, and that's so going to be so situational. And so, yeah, I mean, it's something that it's a judgment call, really. I hopefully this is over time going to get to a maturity, where we'll, practitioners like you and me and the other folks who have been on your program will develop some protocols about how we can sort of make some judgments about these that are going to be a little less individual. But yeah, I think that's something we want to work towards, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, I won't keep you any longer. I know that people said they wanted shorter episodes, but I'm dying to talk to you again. So we'll have to find some
I'd love that.
time and place to make that happen. What's the best place that people can get in touch? Are you a LinkedIn guy?
I'm a LinkedIn guy, yeah, so I'm pretty much on LinkedIn these days. So yeah, please connect with me there if you're not already, and I'll be happy to get to know you there.
Fantastic. All right. So that's Michael Andrews. Thank you so much for your time, Michael, and we'll look forward to chatting with you again sometime.
All right, thanks for having me, Naz.
Cheers. Thank you for listening. This has been the Omnichannel Podcast with your host, Naz Urbina, founder of Urbina Consulting. Let us know on LinkedIn or Twitter what you liked from this episode, what you think we missed, and who you would like us to interview next. Now that you've heard what we're passionate about, you can also check out urbinaconsulting.com to find out a little bit about what we do. Thank you so much, and see you next time.